Hello, I'm Langston, and I'm back on my channel, Military Election Forecasting. So I'm going to be giving you guys a prediction of the 2024 gubernatorial races. So I'm just going to be diving straight into it. Please subscribe. Like, it would really benefit me if you guys started subscribing to this channel, sending it to some of your friends or etc. So I'm going to dive straight into predicting, what I think will happen. So I'm going to be diving into the safe states for Republicans. So I have North Dakota, Utah, Montana, Missouri, Indiana, West Virginia, as well as Vermont. Vermont is quite a surprise, but they have a very popular governor in Phil Scott. He's a very moderate Republican. He's pro-choice, pro-LGBT, very left-wing on social issues and even somewhat on economics. So, he's very popular in Vermont. Like, it's very unlikely that he'll lose his race. And, the other states, I could see Missouri, Indiana, and Montana falling under 15%, but these states have very popular incumbent Republican governors. All of these states are more Democratic down ballot. You Democrats have like no chance of winning the states, but they could easily fall under 15, but I'm going to keep them as safe just for this video. I only have one safe state for Democrats, and that is Delaware. Delaware, it was likely in 2022 in terms of like the vote. I think it was like a D plus 12% margin. But, in a presidential election, you're going to see higher turnout from, Democratic constituent groups in Delaware. We're talking about Black voters, educated voters, which didn't turn out at the same rates in 2022. And Delaware is more Democratic down ballot. So realistically, I don't realistically see it being too much of a competitive race, in my opinion. So I'm going to put over 15% as well. Um, Washington is borderline likely or safe. I think it'd be like 14 and a half or so. So I'm going to move it to likely. Similar to what you saw Patty Murray win by. A lot of people think it's only going to be like D plus 8 or D plus 9, which I don't agree with. We saw in the jungle primary, Democrats did excellent in that jungle primary. And usually the general election is like 5% or so more Democratic than a jungle primary. Turnout in Seattle is going to be a lot better in the Seattle area than it was, even in 2022. And that's kind of going to be a problem. I do think that the Republican candidate there, he's somewhat moderate. He's really distanced himself from, the Trump brand. So I think he can make some inroads in the suburban areas while, maintaining strong rural support because of Trump being on the ballot. So I think he can make it somewhat more competitive, but I don't realistically think that it'll be less like a D plus 13% margin. So now we have the two very competitive states for governor. We have New Hampshire and North Carolina. So in North Carolina, I'm going to give North Carolina to Josh Stein by a likely margin. I think he'll only win here by like 8 to 10, maybe a little bit less than that. I think that people have really became very delusional, very partisan, and I can't tolerate people who can't argue things with data and with math. And North Carolina, I don't see how Mark Robinson could lose by 15 or 20 points. And, people try to compare North Carolina to Pennsylvania, but North Carolina is a southern state. It's a lot more racially polarized. And, you don't realistically see that same racial polarization in the Midwest. It definitely exists, but it's not to the same degree, right? And we saw this with weak candidates. We're talking about Tate Reeves in Mississippi. He did significantly underperform, almost lost, but he still won, right? Same thing with Herschel Walker. And it's a federal race, but Herschel Walker won over 70% of the white vote in Georgia. So, in North Carolina has always been a lot less racially polarized than other southern states, but it's still a very racially polarized state. And for Josh Stein to win by a lopsided margin, he have to convince a ridiculous amount of white voters to support him. And that's just something I don't think will happen. Like right now, Democrats get like in the low 30s with white voters in North Carolina. I think that they could get almost up to 40 against Mark Robinson, but crossing the 40% mark is something that I highly doubt. And I think it could help Kamala down ballot if Mark Robinson is motivating a lot of Black people to turn out in opposition to him. And that's something we saw with Herschel Walker, where, Herschel Walker is someone who represents every negative stereotype for Black people. So, he really motivated higher Black turnout, especially in the runoff election. I think that was the highest electorate of Georgia's electorate being Black that's ever existed, like 32% or something like that in 2020 too. But in North Carolina, if Mark Robinson can motivate a lot of Black voters to come out in opposition, that'll really help Kamala Harris down ballot. But if we're looking at a scenario where the electorate doesn't really change that much from 2020, and Mark Robinson just collapses a lot with a lot of educated white voters that are still going to vote for Trump, but they can't vote for Mike Robinson or, voters in the exurbs, it's not going to really dramatically improve Josh Stein's margin. It's not going to really help Kamala Harris down ballot. So it really depends on the electorate. But regardless, like I think people are really underestimating Mark Robinson. Like I don't think that he has any chance of winning. I think he was already going to lose by like 5 or 6, but I don't think that he's going to lose by like 20 like people are expecting. I could be wrong, but I pride myself on being accurate, and I don't see an electorate where Mark Robinson could lose by 15%. So unless I can see that provided to me, where someone can provide like the demographic data, like provide the evidence, I don't hear it. I just think people don't like Mark Robinson, which is very fair, very accurate. He's made some very extreme, very delusional comments. But whether that translates into an a landslide electoral defeat that people are predicting remains to be seen. In New Hampshire, I'm going to give this state as tilt Republican. I can see it being lean. And, I hear arguments for both sides. Something that's going to really help Kelly Ayotte is Donald Trump is not campaigning in New Hampshire. So that allows Kelly Ayotte to distance herself from the Trump brand, like distance herself from that populist brand that's very unpopular with educated voters in New Hampshire. So it kind of allows her to distance herself because, Trump isn't campaigning, so she can't be tied to him. So that's going to be something that really benefits her with, educated voters in New Hampshire. The flip side is Joyce Craig. She represents a very how do I explain it? She represents a city in New Hampshire, which is somewhat conservative. I think she is the mayor of Manchester, and people don't know this, but the cities in New Hampshire are actually more Republican than the rural areas. Like you see Democrats get their votes from running it up in rural communities. You see they're winning this by 57-40, 61-36. And you see these cities like Rockingham County, Biden only won this by 2. So the Democratic strength in New Hampshire comes from rural areas, not the cities. So her being from a city could really help her because if she can outrun, if she could do better in a city like Manchester, she can really hurt, the votes. She could really cut into the votes that Kelly Ayotte would need to net to win statewide. But regardless, like I still don't think that she's favored. Like I don't think that, I think that Kelly Yacht can really distance herself from Donald Trump. And I think that, she'll have the support of she will have the support of Chris Sununu, a lot of moderate Republicans in New Hampshire, and a lot of Democrats that are open to voting for someone like Kelly Yacht. But if Joyce Craig is effectively able to make this race completely about abortion, really tie herself to Kamala Harris in New Hampshire, she could win the state. But as of today, I would still bet on Kelly Ayotte winning the state. I could be wrong, but I don't realistically have too factual of a case to present to you guys in explaining as to why I think that Joyce Craig would lose. I'm going to give this to her. I mean, Joyce Craig would win. So I'm going to give this to Kelly Yacht by like a percent or so, a 0.5%. I have, North Carolina going to Josh Stein by like 7 or 8. Anyway, thank you guys so much for tuning into this video. Please like, comment, and subscribe down below. Make sure you have a nice day, you guys. Goodbye.